from the Pix 11 social media center. She's got more than 30 years on the streets as an investigative reporter. Now, Pix 11's Mary Murphy takes you deep into the world of cold cases, terrorism, America's drug crisis, and more. These are the Mary Murphy Files.
Good evening, and thanks for being here tonight. I just want to say that this is the first anniversary of the Mary Murphy Files on Pix 11 Facebook Live, and I'm here with one of our most engaging guests from the first year, Curtis Sliwa, founder of the Guardian Angels, and you're celebrating 40 years since you started your work.
And Mary, in your honor, and also because my old beret fell apart, I'm styling and profiling a new beret.
Oh, thank you. And you know, we've seen a lot in all those years, those decades on the streets. And we have breaking news tonight that we're beginning with. I know a lot of you have followed this story. It's heartbreaking. The mother and son who were murdered over the weekend in the Belmont section of the Bronx. The son, 14 years old, Alanche Delorbe, and his mom, Marisol Ortiz, 51 years old. The son was supposed to celebrate his 15th birthday today. Instead, he and his mom are murder victims, and we broke the news late this afternoon that the prime suspect in the case, his name, Hector Cruz, he was the mother's on and off boyfriend. Well, it turns out that Sunday morning, he jumped in front of a train in Hartsdale, which is just over from the Bronx border. It was about 9:30 in the morning, we're hearing. And then it was hours later that the daughter of Marisol Ortiz found her mom and her younger brother. So a very, very tragic story. I know that you followed it. A lot of people have been writing about this today. Let's show you a little bit of a clip because it's the second time the tragedy hit a teen in the last week in the Belmont section of the Bronx. In less than a week, two disturbing crimes in the Belmont section of the Bronx. Late Monday afternoon, Pix 11 broke the news that the boyfriend of 51-year-old Marisol Ortiz, the prime person of interest in the weekend murders of Ortiz and her teen son, had been found dead under a train in Hartsdale, which is not far from the Bronx border. It's an apparent suicide.
Ay, Dios mío.
The boyfriend was actually found a couple of hours before the murdered mother and son were discovered by the mom's 22-year-old daughter. Pix 11 learned the mom and her boyfriend had a rocky relationship, and early on, investigators believed this was a case of domestic violence that turned fatal. The son, Alanche Delorbe, was supposed to celebrate his 15th birthday Monday, and mourners left balloons outside the building. This is the second time a teen has been killed in Belmont in less than a week. On Wednesday, a 17-year-old collapsed outside a bodega in Belmont before he died from multiple stab wounds. And in the case last week, apparently two crews were after each other. That's what I was told by some of my sources. So you have domestic violence this weekend, mother and son, and you have street violence, and it's in the Belmont section of the Bronx, which is where you started your group 40 years ago.
Well, in fact, 40 years ago, the biggest problem you had on Arthur Avenue, Belmont Avenue, was the geriatric espresso-sipping psychotic killers of organized crime. You didn't really have these street crime problems, but if you've noticed, 183rd has become the hot spot. A few years ago, remember the Dominican police officer was shot and killed when de Blasio went to Germany and then came back. And that was right there, 183rd, the Guzman young man, and he was killed. And then, as you mentioned, the two crews beefing, all in that area. That's a real hot spot now. Obviously, domestic violence is a little more difficult. A lot of times, it's out of sight, out of mind, behind closed doors. But that's a percolating area. That's a hot area for violent crime now.
Yes, and I have some footage of the Bodega stabbing. I think the teenager, the victim last week, tried to get inside, but he collapsed on the sidewalk. He had been stabbed before he got to the Bodega. And it sounded so much like Junior's case. And that was when you were first a guest on our show. Very shortly after Junior was killed, 15 years old. Mistaken identity, Trinitarios allegedly behind the whole thing, 14 guys arrested, and here another instance, two drug crews, I'm told, but still a 17-year-old dead, and moms and dads are upset.
And remember, this coming off the heels of the day before where bodega owners now want to sell marijuana the same way they would sell Lucy's or cigarettes or cigars or Tiparillos. that will be a recipe for many, many more problems in the neighborhood if you're letting bodega owners sell legal marijuana, recreational use of marijuana in the neighborhood.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth, because we have a little piece that was put together this morning by my colleague Craig Treadway talking about this very issue. Fernando Mateo is sort of at the forefront of wanting the bodega owners to get this right.
Black and Hispanics have paid the price. You know what? Let's now make the profits and share the profits with those that the governor decides he wants to share them with.
And that is the feeling of many social justice advocates who cite low-income minority neighborhoods as long targets for marijuana enforcement. Those advocates say it's only fair that those communities benefit if and when marijuana becomes a legal recreational cash crop. And bodega owners say, with rent and other costs rising for them, the windfall of revenue is a matter of business survival. Big business that, instead of just flowing to big corporations, they say should flow to the little guys.
Amazon was bringing 25,000 jobs. We have over $100,000 people employed. We get no tax breaks. We get no money from the state.
We don't package cigarettes, but we selling cigarettes. We don't have a wholesale for beer, but we buying beer and we selling beer. That's what we want.
Yeah, how do you respond to their arguments?
Well, I know Fernando Mateo many years. He must be in a drug-induced psychosis. He's got to be absolutely mad. They're already selling 40s, Old English, Colt 45 out of these bodegas to the wee hours of the morning. Causes all kinds of chaos in it. Can you imagine them selling Lucy's, except in this case, they're blunts already pre-made? No. That's not the place to sell the recreational use of marijuana. Yeah, that will just add to more double trouble in the neighborhood and be a horrible example to young people who will think, hey, I can just roll out to the bodega and buy me some Lucy's, except in this case, they're joints.
We had like 2,500 comments this morning after this piece was on, so there were concerns that there would be more robberies in the bodegas.
Oh, robberies and you name it, because right now, remember, even though they're looking to legalize it, you can't open up a bank account because the federal government is opposed to it. So even the clinics, they give you medical marijuana, they can't open up a bank account. And that's why if you look around the country where medical marijuana is legal and recreational use marijuana is legal, a lot of home invasions, because where do people store the money? In the mattresses. That's where they put the scatol.
Well, I heard you on the radio a while back talking about medicinal marijuana, which you advocate for.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you've had a lot of health problems.
Oh, I've had enormous health problems. Shot with 5 hollow point bullets, extraordinary pain, and then a matter of colitis combining with ileitis into full-blown Crohn's disease. And I was on oxycodone, hillbilly heroin, for 2.5 years. Fentanyl, morphine.
And how do you get off that? Or how did you not die?
It was difficult. Let me tell you something. I wanted to chip away on that fentanyl. I mean, that is a powerful narcotic. But medical marijuana has helped me at times when the pain has been excruciating, and I haven't had any side effects. So it ought to be an option, at least available to people out there. And you got to make it more readily available. It's not easy to find now, even though it's legal in the state of New York and New Jersey.
So what do you think about the governor now wanting it legal, marijuana, recreationally, because it's going to, generate about $1 billion in tax revenue?
Well, the argument is, if you know it from the streets, if you tax it at the rates that they're talking about, you'll still have an underground economy. And it's really the strains. What kind of strain? They have gotten so sophisticated in the kind of marijuana they sell that you better make sure that you have the best buds, the highest quality buds, because the street dealers will outcompete you. And remember, they're not going to charge taxes.
So, I mean, this is something that today, when they had, I guess it was over the weekend that they had this rally with Fernando Mateo. He used to deal a lot with the taxis.
Taxis, Mateo, and also in whining, dining, and getting pocket lining. Remember with de Blasio and his crooked friends. So, hey, Fernando, he's got his fingers in every pie.
You brought up fentanyl, and last week I covered the El Chapo verdict, and we had the DEA boss from New York who coordinated the captures with the Mexican Marines, and he was saying that it was El Chapo and his crew that really started lacing the heroin with fentanyl in Mexico, and that's so highly addictive, but also kills a lot more people.
Oh, yeah, and it's so cheap and readily available. And remember, we're not talking about pharmaceutical chemists here who are putting the heroin together with the fentanyl. Who knows what else they're putting in there? And then the Red Chinese. The president's going to meet with, who is that? President who? What's on first? I don't know who's on third. And he has finally described fentanyl, which is produced in Red China, as a narcotic that is illegal, where you could get the death penalty in Red China if you're found manufacturing it. Now, I'd like to actually see him enforce that, because that's where most of the fentanyl is manufactured, and then it comes right through Mexico.
By the way, you were going to run for public advocate. There were about 20 people that wanted to run.
Yeah.
And then you said you got your job back with WABC Radio, so now you can't run.
Right. Well, the problem is you can't be a broadcaster and run too, and I understand that. That's unfair to the other candidates. But I was the only candidate who actually said I would shut the office down. I mean, what does a public advocate do? They have no power. They have no subpoena power. All they do is use our tax dollars to run for higher office. We've seen that with Mark Green. We saw that with Comrade de Blasio. And we've seen that recently with our new Attorney General.
Yeah.
It's sort of using our tax dollars to run for higher office. Eliminate the office. Shut it down. If I had been elected, I would have padlocked the doors and I would have fired myself first, Mary.
Okay. All right, let's go way back. We have a vintage photo from back in the day, almost 40 years ago, when you first started the Guardian Angels and you were on the subways, the number 4 train. And what do you remember about those days and the decades since?
It was off the hook. People can't understand back then. There were no transit cops at night because there were such severe cuts in the city budget as a result of being on the verge of going Chapter 11 that they had no uniformed police officers patrolling from 7 at night to 5 in the morning, what they call the off-peak hours. And the thugs knew you could go on rampages through the number 4 train, which the commuters call the Muggers Express, the 2 train, the Beast, the D train for danger. And those were the 3 trains that we focused on in the Bronx. I was the night manager of Mickey D's on East 4th and Webster, and I brainwashed the crew to follow me as the Burger Boys. We began our first patrols, and then slowly but surely we grew. But the baptism was in fire for 13 years. We were called Vigilantes, Charlie's Angels, Hell's Angels. It wasn't until Rudy became mayor of the city of New York that he called off the police who were arresting me morning, noon, and night and said, these guys and gals, they're helpers.
Yeah.
They're not harmful to your effort.
Well, we got some late footage in, produced by Heath Benfield, who's producing 4-part series called Only in New York. And you're a star in almost every part. The first part's going to deal with Bernie Goetz. Now, what is that, 1984?
1984.
Yes, and he shot 4 guys on the subway.
4 guys, all of whom I knew, because these guys...
And he said, look, you don't look so bad. Here's another.
Well, that he did to Darryl Cabey. That's really what got him into double trouble. Cabey was already on the ground having been shot. And Bernard, we'll say it again and again, Bernard Goetz, you don't look so bad. Pop! He shot him in the spine. He's paralyzed for life. And then he disappeared into the tunnels of the number 2 train, only to surface in New Hampshire, days later.
New Year's Eve, I think.
Right,
yes.
days later.
So Heath gave us a little piece, sort of to whet the appetite of our viewers, because
sure.
It's a really good series. I've seen part 1. So here's a clip, and you're in there.
It was an act of retribution in a city where muggings on the streets and in the subways are daily realities.
Well, I was working that weekend when we heard about a shooting in the subway.
The shootings took place on a moving subway train in Lower Manhattan.
It really shocked the city.
4 men, 3 wielding sharpened screwdrivers, approached a lone man on a subway train demanding his money.
Guys allegedly asking for $5, and he shoots him.
He pulled a revolver, went into a marksman's stance, and gunned them all down.
What struck me was he was prepared to do maximum damage to somebody.
He was ready. He had his piece, and he was ready to preemptively fire on them before they could harm him.
The man told the conductor of the train, in his words, "They tried to rip me off," and he jumped from the train and fled.
Some people identified with it because they really were tired of the crime in the city.
A 13-state alert went out for a tall, blonde suspect.
From eyewitness accounts, police made this composite sketch. No suspects as yet.
Only in New York starts March 8th.
Should be good.
You're featured very prominently because I have seen part 1. And just your thoughts about that time as it compares to now.
Look, I've met Bernard Goetz recently. He's never been in trouble since. He collects squirrels from Union Square Park. Look, he's got all the furniture upstairs and rearranged in the wrong rooms. There's no doubt about it. But he's harmless to people. But in that era, when there were no cops, and when he was Casper Miltos, you know, he was the guy in the beach who used to get the sand kicked in his face, nebbishy, schlubby, easy to pick on. He decided he wasn't going to take any more. Now, the force he used, was it horrific? Was it over the top? You better believe it. But I understand where the rage was coming from. And I knew Troy Canty, Barry Allen, James Ramsor, Darrell Cavey, all four of these guys, these mutts and scales, were robbing people on a regular basis.
I mean, did you
people
see
don't
them on the
realize it.
subways?
Oh, we saw them on the number 2 train, the Beast, all the time. Sometimes they wouldn't rob you, but it would be like Clockwork Orange. They would come up to you, Mary, and they would sniff you out. And they wanted you to have a panic attack, an anxiety attack. And then they go laughing and running out of the train. No. In the streets, in the hood, you take mine, I get yours. They tried to take Bernard Goetz, and he gave them lead before they could get theirs.
All right, so fast forward more than 30 years later. We have some of the same problems, but we also have a gang problem, and that's sort of what we're talking about tonight. And we are also talking about the domestic violence that led to the murder of the mother and the son.
Oh, sure. Well, last time we were together, we were talking about the strength of the Trinitarios. They're still strong, not only in the Bronx and Washington Heights and Patterson, but we saw what just happened. MS-13 and 18th Street. Hardcore gangs that have been battling each other for over a decade. Right in Corona, Elmhurst, Jackson Heights, where AOC is, although she's missing in action when it comes to commenting about MS-13 and 18th Street. She wants to eliminate ICE. She wants to eliminate LIMIGRA, Immigration and Naturalization Service. Hey, AOC, who do you think is going to go after these gangbangers? They are bad hombres.
Well, you know, also, speaking of the marijuana issue from before, we have one other tape we didn't use yet, and I used it 6-7 months ago after the Junior case because the suspects were making rap videos glorifying marijuana and heavy weapons and money, and let's show that now because the whole marijuana issue comes into play. Well, the lead singer there is Jose Muniz, and he was accused of having the machete that was used in the attack on Junior, along with other guys who had knives. And, you know, there's sort of a glorification of smoke, of money. You see the guy with making his circles there, and the weapons, and there's Junior, who was killed on June 20th. So that's a real issue, not only in the Bronx, but all over the city.
Look, we have normalized it. Look at the halftime show of this recent Super Bowl. You had Big Boy and Travis Scott. You look at their videos, that's all they're doing is rolling joints. They're talking about making mad money. And it's just part of our culture now. So to not anticipate that young men, especially with large levels of testosterone crashing through their cranium, are not going to be sort of attracted to that, we're only fooling ourselves. That's why you got to have alternative activities available for young men and young women, like the Guardian Angels, like the Junior Guardian Angels and other activities, or they're going to fall into harm's way, whether it's MS-13, 18th Street, Trinitarios, Blood, Crips, Latin Kings, you name it. They're out there ready to take your kids and grandchildren if they're not properly engaged.
Well, you, at Christmas time, took the Guardian Angels, you went to the Bodega on East 183rd Street, you met with Junior's father, and you had sort of a gift giveaway. What were you hoping to accomplish at Christmas?
Well, the sad thing is 6 months after he was killed, after he ran back in that bodega, and he was on his own as the Trinitarios just dragged him out and kept stabbing him over and over and over. You remember initially, the priests were there, the self-appointed community activists, the elected officials. 6 months later, where were they? Manga nud, not even the hairs of my chinny chin chin. They were missing in action because the cameras had disappeared, because that's how they react. We filled the void. We saw that the family was being abandoned. They really wanted to give Christmas presents out to the poor and impoverished kids in the area, and we said, we can do it. We can find a way. One of our benefactors donated the money. We went out with the Guzman family. We got the toys. And not only did we do it outside of the bodega where he was killed, we also did it in the school where he had gone to, in the elementary school in St. Barnabas, the hospital nearby where he died. Remember?
You're there with his dad.
Right before he entered. See, because once it's out of sight, out of mind, you got to continue to help these families. Because then the gang say, see? You see what happened to them? Everybody said they will help Junior, they would help the family. They didn't help them. We help one another. We're your La Familia. And that's when they embed themselves in the neighborhood, whether it's the Trinitarios, MS-13, 8th Street, Bloods, Crips, or Latin Kings.
Yeah. Curtis, I cannot thank you enough for being here tonight on my first anniversary of the Mary Murphy Files. And I have to congratulate you on 40 years with the Guardian Angels, and I know you've done a lot and you've seen a lot. I want to end tonight with the breaking news again that a person of interest, Hector Cruz, who was sought for the murders of Alanche de Lorbe and his mother, Marisol Ortiz, that he apparently is dead. We're told that he jumped in front of a train in Hartsdale, Metro North train, Sunday morning, and it was hours later before the victims were found in their Bronx home in the Belmont section of the Bronx. Alanche de Lorbe, who was supposed to turn 15 years old today, and his mother, Marisol Ortiz, 51 years old. There's been very high interest in this story, and there's a lot we got to do to keep our young people safe.
Well, you know, I got my brand new beret on for the start of the next 40 years, if I can make it, Mary Murphy.
If anyone can, you can.
I inaugurate my brand new beret right here on your show 1 year after you began. Hey, happy birthday.
Thank you very much. I wish I had a little candle, but I'm happy you're here. Thank you so much. Continued success to you.
Oh, thank you.
All right, and I thank our viewers for being with us all year, and I hope you will continue to watch. We'll be back next Monday with another edition of the Mary Murphy Files. Good night.